What's up, everyone? Beast Mode back here with another video. So today I wanted to just discuss the new instant zombie deck and maybe compare it to some of the other builds and maybe come to a conclusion if it's actually better, worse, or the same as some of the other zombie builds, because I see a lot of debate regarding the deck online. And I have played the deck quite a bit now, and I think I have formulated somewhat of an opinion regarding it. Whether my opinion's right or wrong doesn't really matter. You guys can agree, disagree, or maybe you've come to your own conclusion, and that's fine, and that's why we're having a discussion. So, first things first, I did play in RBT Rulers. I played an old school zombie build similar to something like this. And I won round one, and then round two, I actually made the worst dust shoot play of my life, and I sent back a dark arm that wasn't even live at the time, and I was proceeded to get killed by a diva, and I ended up winning game two, luckily, and then game three, my opponent drew rather well, and I just didn't have any plays, so I was 1-1, and I decided that I didn't really want to play the rest of the tournament just because it's like 5 or 6 rounds and you're already in. It's a double elimination tournament, so you're already in losers bracket. And at this point, topping events is really not that thrilling for me. I've topped enough events. I really just want to win an event at this point. So I don't think there has been an actual reversal in terms of like somebody in losers bracket beating the finalist twice in any of these RBETs. So the odds were very much stacked against me of actually winning the whole event. And sure, I guess I could have played to just try to top, but again, once you kind of top a few events, you don't really, for me anyway, it's just not that satisfying anymore. I really try to get the win, and then I just didn't want to commit a whole Saturday. I had some family events going on, so I ended up dropping from the tournament as 1-1. So enough about rulers. Today we're going to talk about the instant zombie build versus maybe some of the Diva Hero builds, or sorry, not the Diva Hero builds, but the Diva zombie builds, the slower builds, the recruiter builds, kind of the old school zombie builds. So I played a lot of this deck, and this deck does solve a lot of problems while creating issues and problems in itself. So some of the things that this deck is really good at is spitting out a synchro turn one rather quickly with instant fusion, obviously, in the teleport play. The thing is, it's a big commitment. If you go first, you don't get to do the real broken play, which is like instant fusion, the Reaper on the Nightmare, make a level 6, 7, or 8 synchro, depending on what you E-telly out, or summon if you have one of the tuners in your hand. And then you get to Book of Life and then attack directly with the Reaper. That can only happen if you go second, at least. So turn one, you are not really able to make the explosive play. You might be able to just synchro into something, but that's never really that great. And then if you're going second, doing this play into back row can be very dangerous. So again, against Blackwing and Vayu, they don't always have the Royal Oppression. They don't always have the Icarus attack. But if you go instant fusion, they are not going to negate that. Typically, you go E-telly out a Psychic Commander, and they hit you with an Icarus attack right there. That's like brutal. So that stops like all combos right then and there. The deck still plays some recruiters, obviously, so you can still play that slower game, but also making a big commitment. You go down like -2 cards really a lot of the time just to make a synchro, and oftentimes I see a lot of people making the X Saber Airbellum. This card is really it's good in certain matchups, but other times it's just lackluster. And the reason why is, sure, it's great against frogs for the most part. Like turn one, you can, if you have that, say they go first, they do the swap frog play, send the Treeborn to the graveyard. That's like ideal, because if you see this in like instant fusion in a Book of Life, you're able to do the Reaper and the Nightmare, so you're able to rip a card, and then you're also able to send a card back on top of the deck. The problem is, if that does not actually kill the hand, oftentimes I find this Herbellum just being taken by a Goyo Guardian, or they just set their whole hand and this card becomes a vanilla. I think a lot of people just try to make this all the time, and I feel like it just never survives long enough to make it worthwhile. I did see like a few replays where this card completely killed Dragon Turbo, which would make sense because if they bricked up, they don't typically have playable monsters a lot of the time that they can commit to the field. So you can just kind of literally kind of like Yada Garasu lock them, like we used to do back in the day, where they just kind of are draw locked. So there is some applications where this card is really good, but oftentimes if you just make this into open field and attack, and maybe you send them back a turn, they often just take it. So again, I think that this deck is the instant fusion helps with the synchro plays. You don't need your opponent to attack recruiters. You don't need to try to ram recruiters and try to set up that, the 2 turns it takes to make a synchro play. The problem is you make it's explosive, but it's very much geared towards just making synchros. Now, if those synchros get outed, or if they have a way of stopping this play, the deck kind of loses a lot of its power there. It does spit out Caiuses very easily with the instant fusions. I just don't feel. I feel like this deck is more. And of course, we were kind of looking for a way for zombies to be a little bit more explosive, because people are not giving us the recruiter attacks, and we're not able to really attack all the time because of D prisons and stuff. But I think this might have been too much in that direction, where we kind of lose a lot of the control and the grind game that the Diva deck can really play. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. I think this deck gets, in other words, I think it's better into frogs if you can do the Arabellum Book of Life play and they don't have an absolute answer to it. I think that's obviously infinitely better into that. It's better into Dragon Turbo, but again, I find Dragon Turbo to be a bit brittle, in the sense that, like, if you can mind crush them at the right time or trap dust shoot them at the right time, where you just don't do it, you wait for them to actually play cards, you just usually win anyway. Like, if they summon Debris Dragon, you chain dust shoot at that time, and they have just 1 red med, you win the game. Or if you mind crush at that time, you probably just win. So there are some answers to those decks regardless, but this card is obviously really good. I think this deck is worse into Blackwing and Vayu. I just think, obviously, there are just so many more cards that special summon here, and zombies typically lose to that deck anyway. But like, you're just asking to lose when you're playing triple instant fusion, triple Book of Life. You have E-Telly now. You have Call. So in a sense, this deck is faster in terms of being able to spit out a turn 1, turn 2 synchro play without your opponent having to interact with you. But it's not as explosive as Diva. And the reason why is the Diva synchro play is the most explosive, like, synchro play in the game, aside from what, like, Diva Hero can do, in my opinion, where you can, if you can have a Goblin Zombie stay on the field and you summon a Diva, you get to make 2 level 6 synchros and have a follow-up play with, like, Mizuki in the graveyard, and this deck just isn't able to do that. You get the E-Telly, but it always ends on 1 synchro typically. So in terms of explosiveness, this deck would be faster, in the sense that your opponent does not have to attack, and you don't have to attack. You can just go instant fusion, E-Telly, make a synchro. Where this deck here is, you have to usually set the Pyramid Turtle, hope your opponent attacks it, search Goblin, or you set Goblin and hopefully it lives the next turn, or they just, maybe they set a monster, and then you can do the Diva play. But this play is way more explosive than just making an Arabellum. So, or just making 1 synchro. So it's kind of odd that this deck is actually has a higher or more explosive ceiling because of Diva, where you see all these instant fusions and all these crazy E-Tellys. I just don't see this deck able to do that. That's a slight difference between the two. This deck here, I think it's better into Blackwing than this build. Obviously, there's less things that special summon. I think that just being able to set a recruiter and playing the recruiter game is plenty fine. And of course, this deck does have that option. It does play some recruiters as well. But I feel like this mid game and the control game that this deck has is just better into those decks. The other thing I was going to say is, if you look at Instant Fusion, it's in this deck, it actually just serves, it's just a Cyber Dragon, really. If you really think about it, someone pointed this out to me, like, there's not much difference between this and Cyber Dragon. The only time it's different is if you actually bring out a Reaper on the Nightmare. That's the only time. So we've already kind of seen decks try doing something like this, like Pizza's zombie deck that got second. I don't actually have the list pulled up, but he main deck double Cyber Dragon, and Cyber Dragon kind of does similar things. Now, again, Cyber Dragon's not a spellcaster, so you can't make Arcanine Magician. So there are some differences, but the same cards that would stop Cyber Dragon, obviously, and in some instances, Cyber Dragon can be better because you can actually attack with Cyber Dragon. And going second is obviously great with Cyber Dragon. So it's kind of similar to Instant Fusion in that sense. And when I thought about it, I said, you know what, that makes good point. Obviously, this card, the Musician King, rather, the Dark Fire Dragon, both of these can get bottomless. Same thing as Cyber Dragon. The only time is really different, like, again, is the Reaper on the Nightmare. So I think we could maybe load up this deck real quick and just draw some test hands while we're talking about it. me personally, I've tried it. I think it's great. I'm not saying the deck is bad at all. I think that the deck is plenty good. I just think it's another variant of zombies, and I'm not necessarily convinced that it's actually better. So going first here, you can do all the same things as a regular zombie deck, obviously. Going second, it's instant fusion into Caius. The reason why this is not that's not that greatest is like I don't like. Would you like tributing a Mystic Tomato for a Caius? You don't want to do that, right? You don't want to tribute a Spirit Reaper for Caius. So it's the same thing. You don't get any value here. If they bottomless or something, like you didn't gain any advantage. You want to be tributing Caius over Goblin Zombie, over anything that gives you a +1. Sanguine, that's the ideal situation. So obviously you get to do this with, this is an option with this deck. But if this instant fusion was Cyber Dragon, unless you brought out Reaper here, if you brought out any of the other two, it gets bottomless the same way. Typically, you'd bring out Reaper so you could then book a life later on. But that's just one hand here. Excuse me. This is just a typical zombie hand that you can get with either deck. Obviously, we're just going to set Turtle here. To be honest with you, I think that both of the decks are equally as good. I just don't think either of them are any better. I think they both do different things. I think they have better matchups into certain decks, and I think, you know, with this deck specifically, I think it has a better matchup versus Frogs and Dragon Turbo, which is important because both of those decks are very popular. This here is not bad, but again, you need Goblin Zombie to die here, and then you can search Plague. If this is, you know, it could be any type of spell. Your plan is the exact same. If this dies here, you get a Plague, and then you get Book of Life back. You can Mind Control. So Instant Fusion here is really not changing a whole lot. You could instant fusion, bring out Reaper, then Book of Life, the Reaper. So again, the best combo in this deck is not so much the instant fusion, but it's the instant fusion followed by the Book of Life play. So again, instant fusion here into a synchro is nice. Can make it level 7 and maybe attack directly. Also, you can instant fusion and tribute for Caius. So, but again, a lot of this would be the exact same if you had a Cyber Dragon here. And again, I know people are going to argue in the comments that Cyber Dragon will get bottomless and Reaper of the Nightmare won't. Sure, that's true in some instances, but other times you're trying to do a Arcanite play and they have bottomless and they can just hit the Musician King. So the deck I actually think is better than both of these decks, and for a long time I love my slow control ill blood type build. I love the Diva hero build. I'm the Diva build rather, but I think at this point the better of all of the zombie decks is likely the hero build. I know I have like never really played this deck and I wouldn't play it, but this deck here just does everything that this instant zombie deck does. But I think it's just better. I think that it is more explosive than this here. This is a little bit quicker in terms of being able to make a synchro, but it's not as explosive of what this deck can do. This deck can do all the things that Diva Hero does with the zombie package. I played against this deck. This was my loss at Rulers, and I'm not just saying that because of recency bias, but I played this deck. Gold Sark is addition that this deck needed. It is one of those cards where you say, well, you have to wait 2 turns, but it's like a slow but fast card because it gets you what you exactly need in 2 turns. In 2 turns, especially if you go first and open this card, you want Future Fusion. This card is unbelievable in this format. It is so good in so many different decks, and this card here, having access to this card, is an auto win in some like sometimes you just play this card and you just win. This deck does not have an auto win button, okay, other than maybe Dark Arm and then return, but this deck plays all of that. Future Fusion can be an auto win. If you can Future Fusion and make the Diva Mally play, you have a Miracle Fusion. I just feel like the ceiling of this deck is so much higher than the other 2 decks that this is probably the best version of zombies, and we just either A, don't want to admit it, or B, are on the fact that this instant zombie build is just new and everybody likes it because it's new. And again, this is not a bad build. It does solve some issues that zombies have, being slow in terms of requiring your opponent to attack things. It's difficult to ram recruiters into stuff because of D-prisons, although D-prisons are starting to decrease a bit. I've noticed there are less of these running around now, so that will, allow us to then play the game we want, where we can summon recruiters and start crashing and things. I think that also, I do think that there's some options for creature swap. I think that there was a build recently that top with Creature Swap. I think that card is extremely underrated, and I know people go, well, it's just a straight -1. Sure, it can be, but it also can open up some crazy plays, and you can play a really controlling form of zombies. And not even really rely so much on the synchro aspect, which I am not a huge synchro fan. I like to play the deck extremely slow and not because synchroing with anything that is not a goblin zombie is a straight -1 most of the time. So when you do make a synchro, if they have a response to it, you are down in card advantage. And in Edison, card advantage is important. Typically, the person with more cards wins, unless you get lucky and top deck something that happens to out the board at the time, or you rip the brain control, or whatever it may be. But you want more cards than your opponent because you're in a better position to win. Another card that is really, really good, and this does not have to do with zombies at all, is Decree right now. This card is broken. I think this card is going to start seeing play in the main board because it's just extremely strong. It's almost in so many side decks right now, and I think some of these fairy builds are going to start main decking this. I think the Carpath Chaos Fairies already does. I think this card is really good to main deck. And the counter argument is, well, then Blackwings have full range and free range to do whatever they want. Sure, that's a concern, but I feel like Blackwings' strength is the trap lineup. Obviously, Icarus Attack is just busted. And Royal Oppression is extremely good. Blizzard's a broken card. Their monsters are very strong too, but typically when I'm playing zombies, the thing I'm worried about is playing around Icarus Attack the whole time. And because if you just slam Instant Fusion, slam Book of Life, slam this, slam that, if they have Icarus at the right time, it just destroys you. Now, again, they don't always have that, and then doing these plays is like, it's broken when you're able to Instant Fusion out a Stardust or something, but that doesn't always happen. So this is just my 2 cents. I do think still, if I had to pick a deck to play moving forward in some of these tournaments, this is still in my heart here. This is still my favorite. I've topped so many events with this deck. I would probably go to this next. I think that this right here is probably the best way to play. I think Hero Zombies have proven itself over the year or two now at this point, when Silch just kind of piloted and pioneered it essentially, that it was, and other people have taken his exact build and topped with it. So I think this deck probably has the most tops in terms of zombies, Hero Zombies. Because for a long time, the only person really topping with this was like me. A lot of people had moved on to the hero build. I think that this is the way to go. I do think Gold Sark is really good. I should post my replay. My opponent opened up Gold Sark like 2 out of 3 games, was able to play the Future Fusion, and I just lose. And then game 3, he opened the Future Fusion. So this card's just so good. Having access to this is really, really broken. Having access to Miracle Fusion is really, really good. So that's just my 2 cents. I have played all versions of zombies. I'll continue to play all versions of zombies. I'm not hating on this deck at all. I just think that there's a lot of hype right now, and we're not able to see that this deck does solve some issues but creates others. And I think that that's really the whole point of this video, is just to talk through some of the flaws with the deck, which I think is mainly the fact that the Instant Fusion teleport play can be a little bit brittle at times, especially into certain matchups. And I think that sometimes you are committing an awful lot of cards to make a synchro, and you are betting that your opponent doesn't have answers to those synchros sometimes. And I've watched a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Replays recently, and people are playing with total disregard for Gores, Mirror Force, Torrential. Like, people are pretty much saying, like, I'm putting you on that card, and if you don't have it, I win. And maybe that's just the right way to play. I don't know. I've never really done that. I've always been very cautious because I have been burned so many times by like thinking to myself, my opponent doesn't have Gores, and boom, they drop Gores. It's just the way I play. I play slower and conservative, and it costs me games that way too. So I guess playing aggressive can cost you games. Playing too slow can cost you games. So you really have to kind of find the happy medium. I think this deck is probably the happy medium here. It does a little bit of everything. You can play the explosive 1-turn destroy your opponent, and you can go all out, or you can kind of play the slow game. Of course, they all play recruiters. And I like the Gold Sark because you get to pick the exact card you need when you need it, and you can then proceed to OTK. This deck is also side decking Royal Decree, like we talked about. So just my 2 cents. I will be getting into some more deck concepts and videos, and if you guys want to see anything in particular, let me know. Right now it's kind of a slow point in the Yu-Gi-Oh season. I guess we're kind of winding down from tournaments until we get through the holidays. join the Beast Mode Discord server. We're going to be having War League start up in 2024, and we'll be running the BCS tournaments again. And with that being said, I'll see y'all in the next one.